Hello, this is my book report for Once Upon a Town. Um, this is the story of how, one town impacted millions of people during World War II. And you may recognize this, well, I guess a few of these buildings because it was from my previous book report, but this is my take on the town and what I think it would look like when the author wrote this. Now, the author actually was a man. I think the book was written around 2003-ish, but the man who wrote it went and interviewed multiple people who were somehow connected to this town. And this town, they what they would do is they would give treats and food to troop trains, like soldiers on the troop trains that would pass through the railroad, as you can see over here. And I thought it was really cool because it's a real person talking about the real events of a very meaningful thing to a lot of the soldiers, and it was called the Canteen of North Platte, Nebraska. So, to start it out, I will go to my handy dandy teleporter, and I will go to the train, the troop train. I know it looks not so great, but it's a train, and I believe the first story is actually in the caboose. See, this story is about a woman named Lavon. She was back in the day when World War II was happening. She was a young single teacher, and she lived actually not in the town of North Platte, but very nearby. And what happened is she happened to visit um, North Platte one day while a troop train was coming through, and she ended up visiting the canteen where they would store all supplies for the soldiers. So these are my makeshift soldiers over here in the makeshift train cart, and so this is Levon, and she later became a very regular person to hand out goods and stuff at the canteen. Oh dear, should not have done that. Okay, I will go back in my handy dandy teleporter. There we go. Okay, my next story that was in the book was one of Rosalie, and Rosalie was a very young kid. As you see here, it's a mini version of a villager, and she was a young farm girl, and she did not live in the town again, but she lived outside of it and pretty close by, and every Saturday, her and her father would go into town and they would sell the eggs for the staples, the food, meat and butter and that kind of stuff. And when the war started, they would actually visit the canteen and make egg sandwiches because, as you see, they have multiple chickens here, and well, that's what they had. So they would make the egg sandwiches and they would give those out to soldiers. Now we'll teleport back and look at the next scene. Oh dear. There seems to be some blood and trenches. Here we go. Russ. This is the main character for this section of the story. And he was a typical 18-year-old boy who was just, eager to fight a war. And little did he know that the field rations in Europe would actually be awful. So then, when they're all, starving in the trenches in World War II, they would talk about the canteen in North Platte, Nebraska, and I think that's really cool because literally millions of people were affected, and it was very special. I don't know what's going on, but it was very special to many of the veterans that were in the war. So, my final story I would like to share is one of a man called Jack, and Jack is a little bit of a different story because he lived, I think it was Florida, and he had a girlfriend who lived in North Platte. See, girlfriend, and he hadn't seen her in over a year because in 1944. It was, well, 1940s is much harder to get around. And, well, yeah, moral of the story is, oh dear. Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. That's not good. Okay. Anyways, the moral of the story is you need to see your girlfriend at least once a year. So, he decided to join the army and get on a troop train. Where is he? Where's Jack? Jack? There's Jack. Jack. And anyway, Bob Greene. Bob Greene was the author of this book. I forgot to mention that earlier. But when Bob Greene interviewed this Jack, he I believe it was Jack Mannion. Jack replied that he was on the troop train telling everyone that, like, to get all nice, because when they stopped in North Platte, Nebraska, there would be very nice things for them. And, like, no one believed him because, well, no one ever really cares about the troop trains. So they were all, like, astounded when girlfriend and many other people, like, would get on the train and bring them gifts. So that's just my take on the town and just a few of many of the stories of the lives that were affected. And I think that is my second semester book report.